A few days ago, I was in class and a friend of mine asked me a very simple question. Do you think video games count as art? I blurted out my answer before I could even think, and it was yes. Of course, I think video games count as art. But then later that night, I realized just how complex this seemingly simple question actually is. Hundreds and thousands of hours devoted into playing, viewing gaming contents my entire life, but yet I have never asked myself that question. Not emotionally, not academically, and definitely not seriously. And to think it's only in recent years where dev teams started uploading devlogs and behind-the-scenes documentaries of the process of making a game, people are finally starting to understand the sheer overwhelming amount of art that exists even in an objectively bad game. There was even a time when I wanted to make video games the subject of my artwork in studies, but I stopped myself thinking I would not have been taken seriously, and the idea itself was just a bit corny. But now that having seen some of the most confusing, experimental, and crazy ideas people have been calling art in my university, I think it's about time I stopped caring so much about how other people see my work, and instead of making works that can be agreed with easily, I want to finally start making for myself. And with that, in today's video, hi, I'm Endo, and I want to stop pretending that I don't care and address it head on, that video games has evolved to become more than just games, but more like a piece of artwork. And I want to highlight just how much art exists in every aspect of them, as to instead of talking about them as a game, I want to talk about them like artworks. So how about let's start this off with something mainstream, something big. I like robots. Everyone likes them. However, I love them even more when you put them in an apocalyptic setting. Take for example, if you get Dying Light and The Last of Us, in which both franchises I enjoyed very much, but if you just swap out the zombies with robots, I will almost always prefer that version more. To put it in an artistic philosophical perspective, I think to fight robots changes the emotional weight, as there is still a subtle subconscious association with life with organic enemies. A good example would be when you reverse the zombie's voice in Half-Life 2. The very fact that things like these could be a possibility really disturbs me, to kill an individual who are acting against their own will while still being in there. But when you're up against the machines, there's less moral hesitations. If anything, people will feel a sense of righteousness and conducting true justice as you're fighting for humanity when you're up against robots. And oh boy, do I have the perfect game to talk about right now. And it is not our creators. Generation Zero. Set in an alternate version of Sweden during the 1980s, you as a teenage young man return to the countryside only to see that almost the entire population has disappeared. Just abandoned houses, bunkers, and audio logs. And, just a few gigantic mechanical war machines roaming peacefully in the farmlands, nothing too special. Objectively, the game isn't that great. The control of the characters often feels rather clunky, some story missions feels rather repetitive, the inventory design and the game itself is just not very well optimized, and especially the AI enemies often bugs out and get stuck in places. However, the game itself in its concept, I believe, was the first of its kind during 2019. Despite having not finished the game, I still invested a good amount of time in just sitting in the bush and observing the landscape, as the atmosphere was simply immaculate. The contrast between this soft, nostalgic feel of the Scandinavian landscapes and the towering machines strolling slowly in the fields left a deep impression on me. An incredibly strong visual tension created by colliding themes, as this specific aesthetic also reminds me heavily of Simon Stalikantz's collection of work called The Tales from the Loop and the film The Creator. The best way I could describe this genre of work is this wrong, strange sense of familiarity, very much like a quiet dystopia. And even if the gameplay struggled, the identity of the game is very much undeniable. Just to add that icing on the cake, I think there's an incredibly strong connection between this game and our creators, which, if you lived under a rock, one of if not the most successful original IP that has came out in recent years. And since Arc Raiders was originally intended to be a PvE game, I think that really says a lot. So, in my opinion, Arc Raiders was able to perfect the vision Generation Zero was trying to create. Now, let's dive a bit deeper and have a look at games that were intentionally artistic. Outerwilds, Stray, and Lorn's Lore. All three are incredible puzzle-driven games in different ways. And what separates them isn't just the mechanics or the art direction, but also their emotional architecture. Now, it may seem a bit weird that I'm not really analyzing the games as art. Don't get me wrong, all three of these games' art direction deserves a video of their own, but what makes a great artwork isn't just the visuals, incredible mastery of techniques, or perfect compositions. It's also the process and what the one and only once said,
"Yeah? What's the difference?" Presentation!
So let's start with Outerwilds. As someone who never plays puzzle-solving games, I'm glad Outerwilds was my first. Having experienced a frustrating amount of trial and error throughout my playtime, what kept me going was that sense of awe whenever I discovered something new. The game never asks you to progress. It doesn't show clear prompts on what you have to do next either. While constantly reminding you just how fragile and minute you are to this universe, you learn something new every time by just venturing out a bit further, as it's part of the journey towards understanding something much bigger than you. Each planet with their own unique traits and secrets waiting for you to discover them, the game creates this mystery through space and vast distances, which makes exploration feels exciting and yet terrifying. But the fact that you can do it again and again without a care in the world, it's like the world trusts you in some way, as it trusts you that you will eventually figure it out. And that changes you the more you discover. On the other hand, Lorn's Lore is the complete flip side of the coin. How I perceive it was, it's like grasping for that very thin strand of hope in a world full of despair, as you're not driven by curiosity to reach that ever-changing destination, but it's as if it's your last chance of having a shot at living. Unlike Outerwilds and Stray, the environment feels oppressive. The structures, the verticality, the constant hum in the background, this haunting sense of isolation it creates makes you realize you're not exploring, but trying to survive. Then there's Stray, which basically sits in between the two. There's obviously that apocalyptic undertone of the abandoned cities, but it presents itself differently. The colorful palette of the lighting, humans that has evolved to take on an artificial form, despite being more restricting and easier in progressing as hints and guidance are way more obvious, the game still feels natural. For me, having a clear guidance and a goal made me feel more involved in the game. Partly I'm lazy, and also instead of constantly thinking about where I'm going, I'm thinking more on how to get to that location. It's a different sense of discovery with this game, as everything feels strangely intimate. It's also an interesting contrast to, as a human being, we play as a cat. From that, we see our world through its perspective. It's like taking a step back away from humanity to view this ruined future from a different angle, as there's more emotional weight in the atmosphere instead of tensions like Lorn's Lore. Despite there still exist threats, a balance is still present that makes it feel more like a coexistence of hostility and warmth. Now, all three of these games define exploration and space differently. Outer Wilds makes space feel mysterious, Lorn's Lore makes space feel oppressive, and Stray makes space feel personal. And that difference in atmosphere completely changes how we experience the game, even though on paper they're all just about getting from one point to another. Now finally, an aspect of video games I want to talk about with a game as an example that I'm willing to bet money on no one will expect me to mention in this video. Fortnite. And to start, let's look at the loading screens. Amazing, fully rendered pieces of work with beautiful compositions and colors just show up on screen for like 4 seconds or so and you're in. hours of work reduced to a single transitional moment between the lobby and the game, all with their own unique range of different artistic take on the game. To add to that, I want to also mention an event that has started first back in 2018, the Block event, a massive 25x25 tile of concrete slab that allowed the community to make submissions of builds that are rotated out on a weekly basis. Even though the previous and the last Block event actually saved some builds with their map code uploaded on an official Fortnite website, thus preserving the work, I cannot seem to find any traces of the builds that were displayed during 2018. I guess there goes another hundreds of hours worth of work gone down the drain, never to be seen again. Now, if you still haven't got to my point, what I'm trying to say is there exists thousands of hours of invisible work in every game we play. The skybox, the textures, asset design, ambient lighting processes, sound design layering. There's really so much more to a game to just simply disregard them to just as mere entertainment. A YouTuber that I have been watching recently addresses something similar, and that's Moreover. A few of their videos where he talked about small details that exist in Apex Legends' maps. Considering the sheer amount of things that exist in just one map of one game, it really makes you think just how many times have you ran past something that must have taken days to create just to be there in the background. So to conclude, I think the credits artists have been getting with anything entertainment-wise are nowhere near enough of what they should be getting. When we think, for example, of a great game like Elden Ring or Metal Gear Rising series, the names that comes to mind would be, okay, I don't want to butcher the pronunciation here, Hidetaka Miyazaki and Hideo Kojima. But to now ask who designed your favorite boss, your favorite armor, your favorite scenery, you will have to dig for the names of those people. To me, that just doesn't feel fair. The same thing applies for both the moving image industry and the music industry too. We know James Cameron made Avatar, but do we know that it was Dylan Cole and Ben Proctor who helped visualize the film's visual language and concepts? We don't know who Taylor Swift is, but is Max Martin's names as big as her? Or like, if you just go up to a stranger on the road and they will be able to tell you who Max Martin is? Honestly, I think there's something seriously wrong here. I don't hate any of the people that I named in this statement. They deserve the recognition all fair and square, but to only credit something so big to one name just doesn't make sense to me at all. Okay, it's relieving to be able to start talking about things I genuinely believe in and want to defend. Before, I always wanted to make work that can put me at a point where me and the viewer is always at a win-win position, even though sometimes I don't even fully agree with what I'm saying. But after some events that I've experienced in university recently, I feel like that needs to change, as I think it's also essential for developing my own artistic practice as an artist too, as to finally have a personal view and style of creating. Now, to address the other elephant in the room, being the insanely long delay on this video. As I said, uni work has been really hard on me and it's only been getting harder, so I apologize to everyone if you were looking forward to my upload. I think, unfortunately, until I graduate from now on, I'll only be making videos if I think I got the time, as I do not wish to release videos that are half-baked or just sloppy in general. But thank you so much for sticking to the end, as any form of your support would mean the world for me, so a like or a sub would go a long way. And with that, I'll see you all later.